Okay, so the next panel is titled, This is What Democracy Looks Like. We're gonna have a spotlight on Minnesota food activism. So our moderator is Gary Wertish. He's from the Minnesota Farmers Union, and as I say folks' names, feel free to come on up on the stage. And our panelists are gonna be, and I apologize if I mess up people's names, but Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin. He's from Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, Zoe Hollomon from Midwest Farmer of Colors, and Paul Sobocinski from Bottleneck Project. Give them a round of applause as they come up on stage, folks.
Now I think I'm on. All right, there we go. I should know that by now, how to turn on a mic. But well, welcome everybody, and I'd say good morning, but it's a late morning, but good morning. But first of all, I want to start out, before I get started, I want to thank Farm Aid for their coming to Minnesota, and especially for your work bringing the Teamsters and the university together for a fair agreement. As that came, the threat of leaving, I know myself and Commissioner Tom Peterson is here, a number of us reached out to the university and various officials and said, you're going to have to settle this anyway. And if you don't settle it beforehand, it'll just be a disaster for everybody involved. So I really want to thank Farm Aid for coming here and putting the pressure on. It's well deserved. So another round of applause. We are going to have our bios behind us, but I guess it's not there now. So I'll just say, I'm Gary Wertish, president of the Minnesota Farmers Union. I farmed all my life, and now my wife and I, we rent our farm to one of our sons. So still involved with the farm. I still get my fingers in the soil, and I still get little grease under my fingernails too. So I enjoy being a farmer. Once it's in your blood, it never leaves. So thank you for all. And back to becoming a farmer, and Farm Aid really coming here and getting the settlements or the agreements settled. Farmers and labor, we all want the same thing. We just want a fair price for our work and labor, and that's the bottom line. And that's what you need that to build communities. So we need to stick together. It's been mentioned a number of times. We need to stick together. So now I'll try and read a statement. The theme of this forum is Seeding Democracy from Our Fields to Our Future. With that title, I think back to why Farmers Union was started. The National Farmers Union began in Texas in 1902 to address the financial hardships and exploitative practices faced by farmers, particularly issues with credit, marketing, and low crop prices. The organization aimed to empower family farmers through cooperative efforts, seeking better prices, fair markets, and an end to monopolistic practices that bankrupt many farm families. Putting an end to the corporate monopolistic practices has not happened. We as family farmers are having to deal with just a few large corporations dominating everything we do as we buy our inputs and sell our various commodities and livestock. Farmers are used to dealing with things out of their control, like weather and markets. Now, with the president putting tariffs on all our trading partners, we are seeing the negative effects to our markets. With the soybean harvest already starting in the southern states, and soon will be starting here in Minnesota, China, the #1 buyer of soybeans in the world, has not bought a single soybean yet from the United States. And with the cancellation of the local food purchasing program, the emergency food assistance program, farm-to-school grants, and foreign aid through USAID, farmers have lost a lot of markets for their produce. The local foods programs provided a viable market for small to mid-sized farmers, and the cancellation puts them at risk of surviving. Farmers take a lot of pride in growing and raising food to feed people. I don't believe feeding people of need and children is waste, fraud, and abuse. These policies, which family farmers have no control over, have put farmers in another farm crisis. This will cause further consolidation in agriculture, and all you must do to see the effects of consolidation is drive through the main streets of small towns in rural America and see what once was a vibrant business community now has boarded up storefronts. With the recently passed big reconciliation bill, I didn't give it that other title, the cuts to the SNAP program and Medicaid are going to hurt families and communities hard and still adds about $4 trillion to the national debt, which is not sustainable. Farming has always been challenging, as they must deal with weather, markets, access to credit, and land. We need more farmers and all types of farmers to have a strong economic communities. On a positive note, Minnesota Farmers Union, we're building a meat processing center in central Minnesota. We'll be working at 2 colleges to assist them in their meat cutting and processing programs to train more individuals in meat cutting. The goal is to help rebuild local meat shops and businesses in various communities. We'll also be providing a service to local farmers to help them direct market in that area. In another positive in Minnesota, we've had a Minnesota Grown program for a number of years now run through the Minnesota Department of Ag. That provides you as a grower, there's certain standards you got to reach, but it allows you to put a Minnesota Grown program on your product, whether it's livestock or whether it's produce. And you got some local retail stores that actually have Minnesota Grown programs in their stores. This provides, local marketing, direct marketing for farmers, for CSA co-ops, and, and local co-ops, even urban farmers. We heard earlier, there's a movement of farmers in the urban. You don't think of the cities, but there is farming happening. It also provides, there's also a big movement in Minnesota too, getting the farm to school, but direct from farm to restaurants. Sean Sherman mentioned it earlier, Wani, and Minnesota Farmers Union, we have one too, just located close to his Farmer's Kitchen and Bar, where we source as much as we can from local farmers too. All of this putting local puts more dollars in the farmers' pockets and not in the corporation. So, thank you. Okay, we'll start with Ray here. Give us a short introduction to yourself, briefly, and then a little bit about your work and how it relates to democracy. Ray, first.
Hello, Reginaldo Haslett-Marroquin. Buenos días a todos. Saludos desde Guatemala y desde Northfield. I'm with the Regenerative Agriculture Alliance, and I'm so glad to be here. We are based out of Northfield. I came from a place where I was 4 years old when the Civil War started, and I had been here in this country 4 years before it ended. I came from a place where we fought the dictators imposed on us, financed by the United States primarily, and it is really something of hard to comprehend intellectually that literally the chickens came to roost. And so the other day we were talking about this, and I said, I think what is shocking to a lot of us in terms of democracy right now and the threats it faces is that we were used to financing dictators somewhere else, not right here. And so I also came from a place where we just said what we needed to say. And we then went and organized a revolution to ensure that the oligarchs that had imposed the dictators on us didn't get their way. And to do that, we organized a lot of organizing. So democracy to me really means organizing. It means organizing so when I get up in the morning at the farm, I don't have a neighbor calling the sheriff on me because I have an extra shed and them calling the county saying, oh, we think this brown guy has illegals living there. Democracy is when the neighbors understand that I actually don't have to grow corn and soybeans in order to contribute real food to these communities and that I got my own way. Democracy means that I can be one with the earth, I can be indigenous as I was when I was born made of the elements of the earth, of her. I belong to her. I live by that code, and I relate to all living things, and that somehow becomes a problem when everybody else around us seems to be killing everything in the name of food, destroying the planet in the name of food, and somehow I am the problem. That's not democracy. Democracy is when we understand and appreciate that. Democracy is when our representatives, of who there's quite a few here, are able to connect to those real things, to the real science of biophysics and chemistry involved in the processes that nature designed over billions of years to transform unedible energy to us, but edible to trillions of other creatures that are related to us, so that at a certain point in that cycle, we get to harvest it in the form of vegetables and chickens and other things that we harvest to eat. It's simply an expression of energy, and that's what I do. That's my job. I work with a very, very competent team at the Alliance, and Diane is here. She's our executive director. And that's what we do. We simply have reinterpreted all of that scientific basis that the earth established and perfected the processes that delivers us this incredible gift of her called food. When we mess with the integrity of that, we are messing with democracy, because when we are not properly nourished and regenerated at the molecular level, we become something else that the earth no longer recognizes, and unable to express the full extent at which the planet itself gave us the ability to do. To any policy that brings capital into the landscape with the idea of delivering food to us, making it more accessible and all of that, needs to be accountable to life, period. If it doesn't support life, it doesn't support health, it doesn't support your health, it doesn't support the 7 generations coming after us, it is not okay to subsidize the destruction of the planet in the name of food. Now, of course, we are talking about this because democracy is under threat, and it's not just here. But one thing I learned a long time ago, and I will go to my grave with that knowledge and commitment, is that when we give up this fundamental, ancestral, indigenous ways of living, and we refuse to understand that we are all indigenous to the earth, and that nobody, unless you are an alien, of course, doesn't belong here and is not made out of her elements. That is what makes us indigenous. And that we're also born colonizers, and the colonizer is what's dictating all the policies, and that's why we do what we do. Take, extract, no matter what the cost. That is not democracy. That is called extraction to extermination. Somehow we have to get on the same page as far as collectively refusing to accept that, and instead claiming, demanding to have the right to the full expression of our human capacity, which only comes when we can decide collectively how we relate to the land and to life on it. That, to me, are the foundational principles of how we rebuild democracy. And it doesn't happen because one of us is related to the land and doing those things, but because we all agree that we're going to go all the way up to the top. And at the end of the day, yes, we have to elect the people who agree that we humans have a lot more to offer, and we are being degenerated in a way by the food we eat.
Thank you, Ray. Hey, you just need a little more passion.
There was no thunder. Yesterday, we were having a dinner, and this thunder kept coming every time somebody said something important. That was quite yeah.
Okay, Zoe, I'll ask you the same question. Short introduction briefly, and tell us all about your work and how it relates to democracy.
Hello. Thank you for letting me use your mic. Thank you, Rehi. It's very important to say what's true right now, because there's a lot of stuff that's not true, that's like all around us, right? Hi, everybody. Hi. I'm Zoe Hollomon, I, she, and they. I am the executive director of Midwest Farmers of Color Collective. That's right, you can clap and snap, clap and snap. It's wonderful to see so many people that we know and we work with, and also meet new people that we don't know yet, but will work with, hopefully, in the future. I am a co-op member, owner, and co-founder of Root Springs Cooperative. We are a 36-acre farm and retreat co-op in Annandale, Minnesota, on unceded Dakota land, and we provide respite and retreat for people of color and LGBT folks. And it's a beautiful place. I invite you to come out there. And in my capacity as Midwest Farmers of Color Collective's co-founder and new executive director, I work together. I feel like I'm an organizer, and started with that organization, Organizing Farmers of Color. We came together in 2020, just before COVID hit, as there were 47 of us, I think, urban, rural, and suburban farmers of color from Minnesota, Wisconsin, some from Iowa. And we came together, and most of us had never been to an all BIPOC farming thing. We were used to going to other, farming conferences and things, and would come together in our little groups. So this felt amazing for our needs and stories to be shared and centered. And we did a caucus and talked about our issues and the things we felt like were important, and prioritized them with sticky dots. It was all very tech, very high tech. And we just had an incredible time. We invited some folks from California who had worked on the California Farmer Justice Collaborative, who had worked on getting the state government to acknowledge the history of discrimination against indigenous people of color, and also make policy to put a line item in the state budget of ag for us. And we thought, wow, that's amazing. We need that in the Midwest, in our states. So anyhow, we had wonderful leaders. Some of you are in this room, Michael Cheney, lots of other folks. And we talked about the policies that would help us. We knew that there were market opportunities and things, socially responsible food purchasing and things that were kind of being talked about and getting people excited, but a lot of our farmers of color, we didn't even own our own land, or have some of the basics that you need in order to plan, in order to have economic security, in order to borrow against, in order to do the things you need to build your farm business. And so we had an incredible time and said, wow, we're gonna need to organize in order to get fair and just resources, in order to just have social connection with each other, which I feel like is been the theme really of today, yes, democracy and the humanness, and build power. So we had 5 farmers that day stand up and say, hey, I want to help start this organization, and we did. And now 5 years later, we're about 150 farmers of color across 9 states. Yeah, clap for that. Thank you. And we do 3 main things: organize socially, just to meet each other, because that's the basis of any organizing, to know the people, right? To have a relationship so that you can do something together, because this is all the things we're fighting is very risky and scary, and we need to have a commitment to each other. To organize for political power, we need to understand how the people who are making decisions that impact our lives, how they think. We need to get in there. If we want things, we need to get in there and talk to them. And in, not in all cases, but in many cases, they're people, you know, like us, and making, right? I'm like, I have there's lots of legislators in the room too that I'm also looking at, and like, yeah, So, building relationships with them. A lot of them are in situations where like, I have no idea what to do, you know? And so we can help each other because we know, you know, the farmers know, we know what's needed. And they're in the game, like working the game. So we need that. Building political power and then building economic power. So those were the three things that we set out to focus on. And we've built a lot of things since then. You know, we have a Cultivators Fund, which is like a mini grant program. We have a podcast to tell our stories of what farmers of color are doing in the Midwest. Like we're farmers, we're healers, we're organizers, we're, you know, inventors. I mean, we're kind of geniuses, I think, in a lot of ways. So anyways, I'm super humbled that I get to work with them, and I think everything, you know, we started because farmers of color, we didn't have a say. We felt like we were, you know, oh yeah, racial equity, we should talk about that too, that's really important. But we weren't centered, and we didn't have enough representation and power, and so we knew that organizing together we could get that. And that is a lot of work with people, because we're also not a monolith. We're a multicultural group of farmers coming together, and we don't all believe the same things, right? Just right off the bat. But we do share a lot of core values. And food is so sacred to all of us, to every single one of us. I mean, think about your family celebrations, your cultural celebrations, how you show love to each other. It's all around food, right? And but right now, we're not treating food as sacred in this country. And so our justice work is like taking it back. So thank you for that, yeah. So yeah, I'll talk more about kind of the organizing work that we do soon.
Paul, same thing. Short introduction and how your work relates to democracy.
Well, thank you. I'm a farmer right now in transition, involving new young people on the land. I also been a long-time farm organizer. And that organizing goes back to the farm crisis of the mid-'80s, organization that I was part of finding, but also being a leader in, called Minnesota Groundswell. The whole key about this is organizing. And that organizing goes back 40 years. Minnesota Groundswell raised enough cane during that period of time. We said we're just not going to leave the land because we were under economic pressure. We were going to stand together. And part of that was organizing people to come together to the steps of the state capitol. In 1985, we brought 17,000 farmers, and we pushed back. You know, some of the key things we run are still in place today, like mediation, that's at the Department of Agriculture, the Farm Advocate Program. The object is you have to organize and stand up and fight. And that's what we were about then. And Farm Aid, Willie Nelson, the whole crew was the first group of people to stand with us. I remember us getting the first grant. You know what it was called? Sow Some Hope. And that's what we have to do here today. We have to have hope. And hope doesn't just come out of anything. It comes out of us, and it comes out of organizing. That's what democracy is about. Currently, I'm working on a special project after serving 30 years, working with the Land Stewardship Project and state and policy issues on initiatives at the University of Minnesota, all those kinds of things. But right now, I'm working on a piece, and it's called the Bottleneck Project. Farmers Unions are our fiscal sponsor. Part of our effort to get going came out of partnerships. about relationships, long-time relationship that I've had with Farmers Union, LSP, all other kinds of organizations, with the University of Minnesota. The first effort, the first dollars to help us raise some funds came from the regional partnership of the University of Minnesota. That talks about partnerships. The Bottleneck Project came out of this issue of COVID. We saw the large meat processors not being resilient. And part of their not being resilient was not respecting the immigrant workers that worked in those plants and not making it safe. It also told us another thing about policy. We needed a more diverse system of processing. And so part of our effort was to come together. We worked with numerous partners, the University of Minnesota, we worked with the Department of Agriculture and other organizations, and did a report. And that report said more initiatives have to be put into supporting small meat processing. And the Minnesota legislature, Farmers Union and others, LSP, a whole group of people, IATP, all pushed legislation to help support that kind of building and infrastructure. And a lot of that was funding that came into the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, in turn helped out with small meat processors. And that's part of the fight back. Our Bottleneck Project is really a team of 4 of us. A grad student from the University of Minnesota, Julio Teno, who some of you might have a chance to meet later, who works with the immigrant community, works with us, involving the immigrant community to be entrepreneurs. They have the opportunity to be entrepreneurs. You know, if you think about this country, we are a people of immigrants, if we were honest about it. We are immigrants. And my grandfather's side, in terms of immigrants, they welcome immigrants to the community. He came from New York. How he ended up in farming, that's another story. But he came from New York. He told me how his dad brought immigrants to live in the halls in their apartment in New York City. Immigrants were welcome. That's the same thing we should be doing here, and we all know that. That's what we need to do, is stand up. And that's part of the salvation of all of us, how we all stand together. Paul Wellstone said, he did it when we were organizing in the farm crisis, we all do better when we all do better. So how does that fit with farming? How does the immigrant community fit with us? Well, part of our fight back is this food system that's highly concentrated, that Farmers Union has a special person, Justin Stoffern, working on anti-monopoly, but also is building a new structure. And so we look at how to have resiliency these small meat processors. That's the opportunity for immigrant farmers. That's the opportunity for emerging farmers. That's the opportunity for our current farmers to do some direct marketing, to build that kind of market. So that's the kind of work our Bottleneck Project is working on. We'll touch on more things later. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
In Minnesota, we have a history of cross-sectional coalitions. The Farmer Labor Party is a prominent example that was featured earlier this week in Farm Aid programming. How do we develop cross-sector coalitions that work together? Beyond that, how do we maintain those coalitions or working partnerships, even when people disagree? Ray?
If we only worked on what we agree on, we'll be nowhere. There's a general principle that I came with, because we are within Guatemala, there is 22 languages. I don't know if you knew this. So we learn diversity from elementary school, and to at least learn a few words like the Dakota people said before from the others, the other communities. Ishkaech, Tanatsipe, Tanautil, Tasipach, Pitre, Hunuway. That's an expression I learned from the Cachiquel people when I went there, because that is at least a pain of respect. And then my own language, the Quechua language that I grew around too, all of that. And so we always said, you can disagree on 100 different things, but if you agree on one thing that is central, that is critical, then you work on that. And very soon you will find out that there are many other things that you thought you disagreed, but you honestly didn't when you actually make yourself think that way. It's the indigenous way of thinking. So the two things we have to do if we're going to figure this out is, the first thing, indigenize. Indigenize your mind, your body, and your spirit so you may awaken the intellectual capacity, the indigenous intellect formed by the innate intelligence we're born with, by the knowledge and wisdom you learn through storytelling and listening to stories, by living with, eating with, and exchanging experiences with everybody, and then through universities, that where you learn more technical and other kinds of knowledge, combined becomes the indigenous intellect, which when you acquire it, it allows you to see the other 99 things that you thought you disagreed with, and that's how you build coalitions. And the second thing, if that process is going to result in methodology, application of science, and organizational techniques that deliver democratic results, you decolonize the mind, the methodology, and the science and management. And when you do that, then you end up in spaces where we rethink ownership, control, and governance of the ways we do things, the way the land and us relate to each other, and the way we control the bad energy in the spaces so that it doesn't take over. The colonizer in us that we are also born with needs to be tamed. And when we do these things, we build the organizations that are going to lead the future, if we are going to have a future that is worth for humans to be on. That's how we do what we do. That's how we built the alliance. That's the culture we're building. That's how we are moving along, and then comes the practical parts of it. I guess the chickens chose us as their partner. And so we entered this space in what's called the Poultry Center Regenerative Agroforestry System. And then we asked the landscape, what did it think? And the hazelnuts raised their hand and said, we will provide the shade for the chickens when they range. And the elderberries said, we also like the shade, so we can live under other trees, like in the big woods. And then the oak said, well, we'll provide the canopy because hawks and eagles don't really like our branches. Now, we had to reconcile with the basswoods and with the cottonwoods, because that's where the eagles nest and everything. And so they need to be a little bit farther away so they don't take our dinner. Bottom line is, and this may sound like, well, what the heck are you talking about, Reggie? The question was about how you organize. If we indigenize the mind, the blueprint for everything we need to do is right in front of us, right above us, and right under our feet. And that's how we do this right. Don't expect me to say, oh, go and organize a committee to do this and that. Your mind will tell you what is appropriate for your space. And right now, after doing all of this, we now have a region of farmers producing chickens under this system. We bought a processing facility, the only one in Iowa right now that processes chickens. We have a brand, we got a product in the market and all of that, but it's owned, controlled, and governed according to those principles. And that is how it materializes. And now we can cooperate with all of you who eat chicken. And the vegans, you can have the hazelnuts, you can have the squash and all the other things, and the black beans and the corn that also come literally out of the back end of the chicken. So, thank you.
Right. Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, Rehi. I did want to just also mention a correction that everybody here is not an immigrant. Some people were here, indigenous people were here first, and that's right. And they were, people exterminated that, or tried to exterminate them, and then African people were stolen and brought here against their will. And that's right. And so it is really important to see each other You know, if we're going to organize, and when people are talking about decolonize, you know, that is really, really understanding the history, and being human, like Sean and Luke and Shelley were talking about. The one thing that has been very true for me is to know and remember is that separation is a lie. Like, we are not separate from the earth, between cultural ethnicities, between people, between genders. We are not separate, but we've been conditioned to think that way. So we have to, like, take that off, decolonize ourselves. And there are tools. And we also have to figure out how to work together, right? We're talking about organizing, we're talking about democracy, and I think in some ways we've forgotten to use some of the tools that we have once used to make collective decisions, to have group agreements between groups of people, to kind of, in order to take back the systems, we have to understand how they work and what we want to change about them and how to make them work better. And I think in a lot of ways we do, but at the center of that really is like people working with people, right? Which is not easy, it's so hard. It's the hardest thing. But we can do it, like we've done it in the past. That's how we've ever changed anything, right? And we will continue to do it, but I think that's one of the things in coalition building and in movement building that you see is you can have an incredibly important goal. You know, I was part of the police abolition movement here with many other black and brown organizers who were, right, who were saying, no, what other contractor would you allow to kill people and then you keep paying them? Like every year, yep, yeah, we'll still pay you $190 million. No. So that movement was really about like saying we need some accountability and organizing economically and thinking about that. There's so many things to talk about, but I know you need some time too. So, but I guess yeah, I really think it comes back to some of the skills, and I think a lot about Melvin Giles is a right. A lot of people know him. He recently passed, and he was amazing. He was a urban farmer and a mentor to so many people with the Urban Farm and Garden Alliance. But he also led the peace celebration. And I know, he's like very special to all of us. And he did a lot of mediation between organizers, between people in community to help us get back to what we should be doing. Because we all have a lot of feelings and we all bring a lot of things. And when you come to something that's very passionate, you sometimes want to clash. So anyways, he taught us to have skills, to sit in your discomfort. It's okay, you know, and we can work through those things, but we have to hear each other, you know, and we have to know how to have those tools of like, how do you make decisions in a group? Well, we use qualified consensus in our group. So some people know it as Fist of Five. And you can have, so things like that. We use group agreements when we come together in community to say, hey, how can we make sure that everybody feels listened and heard and safe in this space, as safe as possible, you know? And you make those agreements and then you abide by them. And you call each other on them if you're not doing it. Say, hey, you know, we said we want to make time for everybody to talk. So anyways, on that note, I'm gonna pass the mic, but I think it's a lot of those kinds of skills.
Same question, Paul.
Yes, well, first of all, let me apologize for my misstatement. I'm sorry about that. That's absolutely correct. We're not all immigrants. Many people are. And yes, there was a whole population of Indians here and others here before us. And I'm sorry about making that mistake. As to the issue of coalitions, our Bottleneck Project is kind of working on really a kind of a small basis. And that basis is to try to build a relationship of getting immigrant workers connected with the small meat processors to fill the need of a huge problem of labor force there also. But also, at the same time, having the opportunity to be entrepreneurs. So and that engagement of that process, what's important, or at least we feel is important in terms of the ag sector, is for the rest of the farm population to see the importance of that small meat processor about the direct marketing opportunities and those kinds of pieces, that it takes a team of people. It takes many people to be engaged. And we see the importance that the immigrant community brings to small meat processing and to the farmer. So we build a relationship. And I don't think we're going to change what's happening in this country until we get people talking to each other and seeing from experience, hey, this new person who, for example, we have one person who now exactly new from Mexico, just in the process of closing on a small meat processing plant. So people in the community can say, hey, that business is going to continue. And the immigrant community is part of making that possible. And that's important to those of us who are farmers. So that's kind of, it's a small step-by-step basis that our team of 4 works on. Thank you.
At Farmers Union, we've prioritized taking on the corporate monopolies, in part through strengthening our antitrust laws. In my mind, that's also a question of democracy. Corporate consolidation of power affects everyone in this room. If we have a few large corporations controlling any given industry, they get to dictate the rules of the game. For example, we have 4 corporations controlling up to 85% of the processing in beef, pork, and chicken industries. There are 8 companies in total, with 4 dominating each of the 3 species. 3 of the 8 are foreign-owned, and 2 of the 8, JBS and Tyson, dominate all 3 species. Challenging the status quo or going up against big corporations can feel disempowering. How do we help people imagine the future they can create for themselves, and do you see corporate power impeding democratic participation? I'll start with you again, Ray.
Right. So again, I go back to my roots. And like I said the other day, I truly believe I'm indigenous to the earth. And that means my roots go back to the origin of life. That's where it came from. So like yours. And when you think that way, there's something about just speaking the truth that is comfortable. You don't get uncomfortable because somebody spoke outside of the truth, let's put it that way, because there's other ways to call that. Yeah, exactly. And so back to this whole question and back to those original principles, we also learn to fight. Serious. We're not talking about demonstrations. We're talking about armed conflict. Learning to use weapons, learning to hold the line, hide, seek, ambush, that kind of stuff, hardcore. And we also learn that if all of us did that, there was no point to it. And at the end, there was a point to it because it held the powers, the large powers that overwhelmed us, held them at bay while we did the organizing. Because that is what the system hated and feared the most, was us organizing. There is a reason. There is this absolutely core individualistic nature to the American farmer. There is nothing more difficult than to try to organize farmers. You can bring them into associations, into groups, big parties for a candidate that is visiting, but then they go back and it is their farm, darn it. If you say, let's organize the region so we can take back the elevators where we trade our corn with, let's get these companies, I won't name them because they were already named. There is many others in the region, by the way. But if we say, let's organize so that we can take back the supply chain and start controlling, governing, and owning it from the farm gate, the processor, the value added, and all the way, suddenly you become this enemy of capitalism and enemy of the farmer. right? Why? Because we haven't yet understood that division is the foundation of corporate totalitarianism. And so we stand back and let it be. 5 minutes. Got it. Okay, so.
That's
Yes.
the key for you to pass on the mic, Zoe.
And,
to Zoe.
and we'll let them take down the companies.
Thank you, Rehi. Okay. Yeah, total. Yeah. Thank you, Rehi. Yeah, I think, okay. So I think part of developing cross-sector, I mean, we have food is connected to everything, right? Like our culture, our natural environment, labor, economy, pretty much everything. So there's not really a problem in knowing that it's cross-sector, right? But I think part of it is us seeing each other and saying, oh, you know, you're working on environmental issues and I'm working on ag, and we should work together, right? Unfortunately, in a lot of our in policy arenas and other arenas, those things are separated, and people are like stuck in their, you know, silos, and they don't like expand their view to say, oh, yeah, okay, so we have farmers who are, you know, dealing with pesticide drift and water contamination, right? They finally get their own land out there, and it's been monocropped for, you know, 80 years, and they're you know, putting investments in the soil and growing, and then, you know, they don't expect like, oh, but my water quality is bad because I'm surrounded by farms that are spraying stuff that's destroyed the quality of my water, and it's not safe to drink. Or I'm next to a neighboring farm that's spraying something and it comes on my crops. And I'm growing without chemicals, but like, how can I, you know, can I still say my stuff is organic, and like, who's gonna protect me? And then I come in there and say, actually, we have to fight for policy to protect ourselves against those things. So I think it's not hard to see the connections, but I do think we have to be willing, as folks who are used to and are made to work in silos. This is my issue, this is my only issue, and I'm going after it. Or even in our organizations, you know, where you're like, I really need to focus on building my organization, I need to get my own people organized, I understand the pull of that, and we need to see each other, right? And say, hey, you know, we're farmers, we're African American farmers, and we need land, and we are fighting to get land that is the ancestral land of indigenous people, right? And so we need to like be able to turn to each other and say, hey, how would you like for us to stand in solidarity with you? How can we show up for you? You know? And there's so many amazing possibilities to heal each other in that too. I remember when we were like several years ago talking about the reparations for African Americans and Native Americans, and there was a lot of fighting, and I felt like listening to the in between the lines of what people were saying. Some African Americans were saying, you know, I don't know about some of my own culture, my own history, because our people were stolen and brought here, and we can't trace back some of those things. And so no, I don't. How can I know about your history as an indigenous person? But the piece of that was also like, I think the beautiful thing that could come from that is like, oh, I should be able to know my history. And it is also important for me to know your history and for you to know mine. And that's actually the only way that we can be in solidarity together to fight together, right? And so, and I think, you know, so that we don't get divided, because the divide and conquer thing has really worked on us, right, y'all? It has really worked. So working against that, and I think Yeah, just remembering the humanness, I think, again, is really important in doing coalition work, so that we're not saying, we're not harming each other, you know? And we're actually able to work together. And I think, yeah, relational organizing is the way to do that.
Thank you, Zoe. Paul, corporate power impeding democracy.
So corporate power is really intertwined, you know, in all our institutions. For example, our educational institutions. For example, right here at the University of Minnesota. They get to name buildings here. Jim Benner was telling me about Best Buy. We all know about the Cargill building. And that whole factor plays a role. And it plays a role in determination about what policy might be in the future at the university and about our opportunity as sustainable farmers or organic farmers or people of color to have a voice. And for example, one of those voices has been that where a number of organizations have stood together called the Sustainers Coalition, called, you know, organizations like the Land Stewardship Project, the Sustainable Farming Association, IATP, all part of a process of over 30 years ago creating a relationship called the Minnesota Institute for Sustainable Agriculture, MISA. So what did we face this year? We faced a situation in which by July of 2026, there was a recommendation from the dean here, the CFANs, that program be terminated. Well, why? Now, you may say, well, Paul, we were going to have to fight the university. Well, we built a relationship with the university over 30 years of finally having an opportunity to move programs forward at the university. So we have to understand why the university is in its predicament. It's because Congress is cutting the Hall funding, and all those factors come back and affect the university and affect all of us. And so the trick for us, for those of us who have been engaged in sustainable agriculture and otherwise, is to look at how to continue this relationship, to say to the university, MISA needs to continue. So we're in dialogue with the university about that. We're not closing the door, but at the same time, we're telling the truth about what the situation is. And to me, that means working that relationship, building and continuing that relationship, even when it gets adverse to us, not giving up.
Okay. Christina, does that mean we have time for questions or not?
Yeah, we're going to go to 11:15.
Okay. We'll take a few questions from the crowd. We got a hard cutoff at 11:15, so. There's mics around somewhere. There's a hand way in the back. And when you get the mic, hold it close to you, because I think that was the problem in the previous panels.
This one doesn't work, so you're going to share all across. I got one back here. Hi, do you hear me? My name is Marina from Puerto Rico, and right now we have a big issue in Puerto Rico, the Act of Jones, Act 60, and the Law 20, which is displacing a lot of Puerto Ricans right now. We don't have access to land, and like, we promoting agriculture, but we are being sold in big pieces. So how do you suggest for us, like, how can we also advocate out here? Because this is a big state, but we an island. And everything that goes to Puerto Rico, it's on a U.S. ship. We don't have access to make business with nobody else. And I would say 90% of the food that we are consuming, it's coming from the United States. And we are worried. How do you suggest that we continue to make this happen?
That's a challenge, there's no doubt. You know, I mentioned briefly the tariff policies. You know, in the United States, we got to work with the other countries. The USAID program was started to help spread democracy throughout the world, and that's being cut. It seems like it's not, seems like the democracy doesn't be the top of the agenda in DC anymore, which is unfortunate. You know, I understand the struggles you're having. We have the same struggles for people of color and various ones within the United States too, access to land. And that's hard. You know, you have a different situation being in a different country. Here it's basically the large amount of capital. Well, that's, yeah, I'm sorry, I apologize again, yeah. I didn't, and I'm sorry I didn't quite hear where you said, you know, earlier, I didn't hear the Puerto Rico part, so I'm sorry about that. But that's really a worldwide challenge. I do a lot of work with the World Farmers Organization in Europe, you know, made up of various, about 85 countries throughout the world, and we hear that no matter what country. A lot of African countries, the same thing. It's a worldwide challenge. I don't have a good answer for you. Sorry. I mean, we'll advocate as best as we can.
Hey. Okay, so we're also fighting for land, right? And we did a lot of organizing and policy to say, hey, the government, you need to make funds for land access for discriminated communities because we don't have it, right? We didn't get all the benefits that the white baby booming farmers got, okay? Or that the people who, after they came back from World War II, right? The soldiers who came back from World War II, some of them were given like interest-free home loans, right? And free education and things like that. And some people weren't. And so that's, you know, part of our past that we have to change. And so one of the things that we're doing is, well, we still fight for land access and organize people to engage in the political system to remind our legislators that, like, hey, if we invest, we need to invest in the outcomes that we want, right? If we want healthier communities, we want healthier local economies, we want to protect our natural resources so that we can have them to use in the future. If we want all those things, we need to support the policy and the investment to get us there. And right now, we're not doing that, right? One other thing that we did is we started a land fund. And that was a kind of a new area for us because we're organizers, like, you know, and farmers, but to get into building our own fund, to have farmers of color say, these are the values of having a fund to be able to have our own resources to distribute. I would love to talk to you a little bit more about how we did that. I don't think there's time right now, but I'm happy to. But I really do think there's such incredible innovation happening. We need to figure out how to get those resources for us because we are doing amazing things that will benefit everyone, right? It will benefit everyone. So I think we have to get out of this like scarcity mindset. That like, oh, if they get stuff, then we don't get stuff. That is also something from the oppressor. That is, we don't have to abide by. So let's just remember that too.
One of the things Minnesota has done is invested in beginning farmer programs and emerging farmer programs, and more resources need to be done that way. This last budget cycle, finally agriculture got a bump. Not enough of a bump, but it got a significant bump. Agriculture, the growing food, all contributes to the economy, and so more resources need to be tied that way, and we need to do more in terms of those dollars and call upon our legislators to make that kind of investment. We need more diverse agriculture, more people doing many things on the land, in order to take back this food system.
Go ahead, John.
Hi everybody, I'm John, and thanks, this talk is really powerful. So one thing that struck me, Rehi, when you spoke, you said something to the effect of, you know, as we cultivate our own power and as we cultivate our own organizations, you mentioned something about decolonizing the structures that we're creating. So I wonder if you can elaborate a little bit about that and kind of what that means, because I see this giant challenge of, as we organize, the tools often that we have to organize come from the colonizer, the oppressor themselves. So how do we get out of that box, and how do we create new systems that kind of can decolonize our own power structures and our own organizations as we build those?
Right on. And thanks for that question, because one of the first things we did was to examine the chain of colonization and structures and systems, the corporate structure, the board of directors, the nonprofit structure, all of those things. Those are colonizing systems that were built to be able to exert control by rules, by policy, by allowing, not allowing, this and that. If you donate your money, then you can't tell the receiving entity what to do with it. That's all intentional, it's part of that colonizing system. The Native American consuls were imposed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs to the federal government so that they would have a direct line. And I don't know if I read some of this history because I wanted to know how much of that was actually a colonizing process. And the Catholic Church, for example, the only one that could authorize whatever the consul could do in the community was the religious representative in that region appointed by the government and so on and so forth. It was colonizing structures. And so, but the Native American communities here had also the drum circles. They also have their ancestral organizing systems. We're very different. So the federal governments, the founding fathers, as we call them, they came and copied the federation's governing systems and then took it and turned it into an extractive, exploitative sort of purpose. This is the purpose that was changed. And so they removed representation where it was inconvenient for the purpose of extraction and exploitation. And they removed certain individuals that would continue to hold on to their ancestral systems so that they will not, make, like in Bolivia, they give rights to the land, to Pachamama. All of that was removed so that they could clean out and purify that process. So how do we do this then? We just relearn what worked for tens of thousands of years, where this continent was managed in a way that was actually regenerative, not this whitewashed version that is everybody's throwing around just to put a label on the chicken, but the real thing. And so we now have, and you can see this in all of our materials, this multitude of circles where we have recatalogued the ancestral Mayan system of organizing and governing and owning and controlling, which actually is no different than the Native Americans Lakota system, which I didn't know it was the same, but it just makes sense because all of these ancient communities mimic the governing systems and the control and all of that needed to be for there to be relationships within people and all of that. They mimicked it on the relationships of their relatives in the landscape. And so the mycelia were part of that. The Tioshpeye, for example, in the Lakota language relates to the families of families. The Mihe, for example, we went and studied that, how the individual and the family and the relationship between the families, and then the Oyate, the people. All of this was part of a structural system that allowed participation, decision-making, and grounding it on the real stuff that happens underground and around you. We forgot all of that. And we now accept these systems of, consensus and all of that as if somehow that reflects those ancestral systems, but they don't. And so recognizing that is the first thing. Second, recuperating that ancestral knowledge. And third, adapting it to what we want to do. In this case, with us, is about food, how it's grown, how it goes through the processor, how it goes through the what is called supply chain, which we don't call it supply chain, we just simply call it trade relationships, and it's circular, it's not linear. All of those things is how they colonize and actually get this right. And we have built a blueprint that we're putting into practice, and even though it's not perfect, believe me, we just all got to go and do our best, and you'll see we'll do better when all of that gets done better.
I think we have a hard stop now.
We take 2 more questions. But
Okay, 2 more.
To answer this one.
All right. I got to check with my boss, and she gave us okay here.
I wanted to add a couple of examples too that I think are interesting and relevant. Certainly, I think seed saving is one of those things that has become a way that industry has taken over our food, and seed saving is the way to fight back. We have worked with Ujamaa Cooperative Farming Alliance, and they have been wonderful in kind of helping to teach and bring together like a national network of people to save our seeds from our cultural foods. There's also, like the germplasm, like seed vaults that are U.S. and like European controlled, and they're kind of like museums. Like everywhere that they went to colonize, they just like took people's seeds. And so there's been a very large movement of fighting back to say, hey, you have been just taking and hoarding local indigenous people's seeds for 100 years. We deserve to get those back. And so that's one example, I think, of fighting and ways to address some of the power structures that have really been oppressing in impacting food. I also think values-based procurement, and it's a way of economic organizing that really like says, hey, it's hard to get the food corporations, like any one organization, to say like, hey, food corporation, you need to change how you're doing things. But when they are trying to get a contract renewed, that is the time when you can say, oh, you know what? It looks like we give you $2 million a year for your contract. And we're working with a set of values right now that values, fair labor and local economies and sustainable, agriculture, taking care of our natural resources. And so you've got 2 OSHA violations. I'm going to need you to take care of those before we will give you another contract. And that is a way that you can really like force some change, right? What just happened at the U of M, right? With the workers, right? There are ways that we can change those things, and we have to also kind of learn their language. Like, okay, I can see that your language is money. Let me speak in your language. If you don't do what we need, we will not give you our money. So that's the thing I wanted to mention.
Thanks. We'll do 2 more.
Yep. All right. The message that MISA
Hold it a little bit closer.
The message that MISA is being canceled, and that the endowed chair is moving to another department, possibly, that has very little to do with sustainable agriculture, is a concern, because I think that's the department, the agency, or the department that is actually helping small farmers, or farmers that are looking for more sustainable solutions. And so I'm wondering what you think, Paul, the role of public institutions should be, especially the land-grant institutions, which were designed actually to help farmers rather than industries. And it seems to me like the universities are really pursuing shiny objects rather than helping ground solutions that really would work. Do you have any comments about that?
Well, I think the answer to the question you asked about MISA and what are the role of public institutions, the role we need public institutions to take is, first of all, to continue to welcome the partnership that has been built over the years by the Sustainers Coalition, and also by having a MISA board of directors that have a say, and the university actually had a signed partnership that it's proposing to end in July of 2026. And so the role we need the institutions to take up is to stand up and speak out about these cuts about what they mean, the cuts of public education, what it means, because that's important. And it's also the role of the institutions, I believe, to stand with those who have come and worked together with them to build opportunities for farmers to engage in sustainable agriculture, to improve the environment. For some of the programs at the university, like Forever Green, that are very, very strong programs and have really starting to get at the issue of water quality, about the kind of farming that's important, about, for example, there's a position called the endowed chair at the university. Many people in this room, Jen Vanderpool back here, a farmer, one of the first people endowed chair. I think Carmen Fernals, you were endowed chair back here in the corner, about what they bring in that relationship. It's a relationship that's been built. But, you know, obviously our power is not quite as strong as the dominant organizations in Cargill and some of the other people. So we have to reconfigure with the university, sit down, work with them, which we're doing, and build back this relationship and look for how to continue MISA. You know, just like, you know, Farm Aid stood up and said, look, we're not going to let, we're going to stand with the workers. We're not going to cross the picket line. And in that same way, numerous groups are standing and saying to the university, we don't accept shutting down MISA. And that's what it takes. People standing together and organizing and continuing that process. Organizing has always been messy, always difficult.
Yeah, I was going to say too to that. I think it's also very important to remember that, you know, when you want and you need to bring public support to save something, it's important that, you know, that thing is valuable to lots of people. And so I think we also have to work to make sure that programs that come out of universities like that really do reach our BIPOC communities and other folks. And, you know we got one of the endowed chair positions to help build our Farmer of Color mapping project. And, you know, we were told, like, not enough of these things go to Black and brown folks and Black and brown led organizations. And we said, oh, okay, well, you could do something about that. So I think that it's also like a reminder of making sure that the programs that exist, and while we're talking about this, like, most of the universities and colleges are like land grant based, right? Which has a whole history of, like, it's built on stolen land and stolen resources and stolen labor. And I think we all need to kind of remember that as we are saying to the universities, like, you know, yes, it is so important to have these knowledge centers and find ways to reconcile the bad that has been a part of the history so that we can do good and do better because there's so much better that needs to be done. So
we'll take two more questions. I got one here.
Okay.
This is more a comment, I guess. I'm Jim Vanderpool. My farm is Pastures of Plenty Farm, and we have a meat sales company promoting or selling the products we've produced. In 1998, we were ushered out of hog production. I don't expect that a lot of people in this room understand what I'm saying, but you can take my word for it. We weren't going to be producing hogs anymore because the corporates had control of it. Now, what Paul is doing, for example, and certain other people I think too are working on, trying to get small processors back on a healthy basis, trying to make sure that those small companies transition on, that other people that are interested in actually starting businesses or maintaining businesses having to do with ag production but aren't so interested in being a cog in a corporate wheel, that those people have a chance. And I commend anybody that's working in that area. That kind of work is the only reason a farm like mine survives. That's the long and the short of it. We cannot survive producing for the major hog corporates. That's not possible anymore. It's just not possible. So we've worked very hard and are still working very hard. We have my son and daughter-in-law who are involved in the farm and the company are taking on as their responsibility reaching out to markets and trying to improve our contacts with people and tell our story so that people that buy our products know about the products, where they came from, how they're cared for, and all of that kind of thing. That's critical, that's central. But in order for us to have time to do that, we can't always be trying to survive in the context of corporate stealing from us. And that's what the care and improvement of the small processors in the rural areas, and I think also the urban areas, that's what that's all about. That's how critical it is. We can talk about how the corporates run everything, and they do, but we also need to talk about how we're going to take that back from them.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. You have one more there, Christina?
Hi. Thanks for the one more. My name is Becky Canton McCoy. My mom was Ann Canton.
Closer to the mic.
And she spent a lot of time advocating for farmers in the rotunda of the Capitol here, in the halls of Congress, trying to help farmers fight for democracy. So I'm glad we're talking about it. I have more of a comment than, or maybe homework for you. I'm finding out that my daughter is a lot like her grandmother. Right now she's working next to Doge fascists in DC as one of the last about 200 USAID people. She was furloughed and then called back, and so she had the choice to go back and work with fascists or not, and she said, if I could feed any people, I'm gonna go back. So my question is, why have farmers not fought for food for peace more? And I guess my ask is, I asked her, what would she say if she was here today? So she sent me a text. I had to edit it a little because her, her language is a little salty these days, but she said, if you care about ag and foreign assistance, either personally so you can sell your crops, or morally to feed people facing starvation, you need to hound your senators and your reps and the ag committees right now to keep Title II and other ag programs alive, untouched by political bullshit. I didn't edit that one. Both for appropriations in the current budget markups and in the Farm Bill reauth that's coming. Don't support it going to USDA where it's probably gonna die. And finally, force the State Department to keep promises to move staff from USAID to the State Department to continue buying US commodities and feeding people. They are not keeping that promise now, so please, over lunch, I've heard they're gonna vote on the budget bill this afternoon as I was sitting here reading my news feed. So over lunch, call your representatives, and that's your homework. Thanks.
Thank you, Becky. I knew your grandmother well, or your mother well, and spent some time with her in a few trips to DC, and yes, she definitely was a fighter for the family farm. the real family farm. There's, everybody likes to advertise their family farmers. We have one very large hog producer within the state that says they're family farm. Well, they're far from that, but it's not my idea of how I grew up on a farm. But I think we're at the end here, and we in Farmers Union, we have been advocating for restoring those projects, the various cuts. I know last week when I was in D.C., I overheard some farmers from the South talking about their rice market, how they lost their rice market because 45% of their rice went to the USAID program. So that was a direct impact on those farmers in their crop. Christina?
Just a quick thing. Most of these problems seem too overwhelming, and it is part of the strategy to make us feel helpless and unable to do, paralyzed. So go back, find the one thing you do well, stick to it, do more of it, find others, organize, and keep going. It's the only thing we can do.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We each need a lane or a role. There's many things that you can do. So you don't have to worry that you're not, politically savvy, or you're not this or you're not that. Like, there's many things that we can all do. And I would also say for small groups of folks or people who are individuals and you're looking for something, like, there's a lot of pretty amazing organizations out there that are doing phenomenal work, and they all need support. There are a lot of beautiful and incredible BIPOC farms that also need support and work. So if you feel motivated, please go and support them. Ask them what they need. They have lots of needs. Yeah, I'll say that. That's policy, activism in policy and doing political work is extremely important, and there's more ways to make changes as well. So those things too.
My final part that I think really resonates with me, but it calls on all of us. Good people always make a difference. They always make a difference. Never forget that. Use your voice. Stand together. Organize.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gary, Rehi. Oh. One last sentence, closing it out. Go ahead.
I just want to make a comment and once again just thank Farm Aid for everything they do in coming to Minnesota. So thank you, Farm Aid.
Thank you so much. All right. Thank you, Gary, Rehi, Zoe, and Paul. What an awesome panel. One more time. Woo!